Hey everyone, it's Colin. How's it going? It's that time of year again. So you had questions, I have answers. This is Q&A number 4. So once a year, I put out a call for your questions. It can be about anything, gaming, tech, computers, cars, whatever, and I got a lot of really good ones. I picked the best ones that I could find. Let's jump into it because there's quite a few. The first one, will the cameras in mobile phones ever surpass the quality of those used by amateurs and enthusiasts? I think we're there already, to be honest. The cameras in smartphones really seem to be kind of the defining feature, at least for the last couple of years. It's the one bit left for smartphone makers to really innovate, and the quality coming out of these cameras really is just amazing. There are tons and tons of YouTube videos being shot entirely on smartphones now, and even some professional photographers have started using newer smartphones as backup cameras of sorts. Lots of indie films and such have even been shot either on smartphones or using smartphones. The only thing that smartphones really can't touch are professional level type of cameras. There are just certain things you can't do due to the laws of physics, the small sensor, the small lens, that sort of thing. But the amateur camera market, like the small point and shoots, it's all but dead at this point. Pretty much everyone just uses their smartphone, and the quality really just kind of holds up. Okay, next question. Do I think the Switch is as hot as everyone claims, or is it more of a Wii U but portable? All I can say is the Switch is legit, and the sales numbers really seem to back that up. Nintendo definitely has a hit on its hands, and I think the portable aspect to the Switch is really what's pushing it ahead. I mean, yeah, in some ways, people wanted a console that just wasn't the Wii U, but portability and mobility is really just the name of the game these days, especially if you look at other tech sectors like smartphones and laptops outselling fixed things like desktops just by a wide margin. People want to be able to take their technology with them. So the Switch offering home console level performance in a portable package, I definitely think Nintendo has a hit on its hands. Do I have a PC game that I really love other than SimCity 2000? That's a bit of a tough one. The one game that really kind of comes to mind, other than Snood, which I had a bit of an infatuation with in kind of the early mid-2000s, which I think a lot of people did, probably Quake 3 Arena. This was a story I think kind of left on the cutting room floor from one of my previous podcast episodes where I was talking about working in the computer store back in high school. On the sales floor, the most powerful machines that we had for sale, the ones with dedicated graphics cards, the higher end stuff, we had copies of Quake 3 Arena installed on really just as a demo. And it was the demo version of the software, so we weren't pirating anything. Don't get any ideas. But it was really meant to just show off to customers, look, you know, if you're into gaming, this is what these computers are capable of. Well, I will admit that on, say, Saturday nights when things were slow, we didn't have any customers in the store, we had already done most of the work that we needed to do. We were just a few minutes from closing. We tended to fire up some games of Quake 3 Arena and play them on those machines. I'm not going to claim to be the best player at first-person shooter type of titles, but that game at that time, considering where we were at in terms of graphics horsepower and CPU horsepower and video quality and all that, it left an impression on me. So I would say maybe other than SimCity 2000, maybe Quake 3 Arena. Next question is from Keith over on Patreon. Keith, thank you for your support. Where do I see the future of the Mac as a platform? Are we on borrowed time until an iPad Pro can run Xcode to release iOS content? I do seriously think that Xcode or some other software development platform, like really well integrated, robust software dev for iOS devices is coming. But I don't think that's necessarily going to spell the end of the Mac. There are certain things that tablets and smartphones just really can't do. Will we continue to see a merging of the Mac OS and iOS in terms of features? Yes. Do I think they will ever totally merge and just have one OS and everyone's just going to have like an iPad Pro on their desk and they'll just be sitting there tapping away on the screen all day? No, I don't think so. I think there will still be enough tasks left that a keyboard and mouse and a real pointer-driven interface are still going to be better for. I can't imagine trying to cut some of my episodes together on a tablet using a touchscreen. I just need that level of precision that a pointer and a mouse and keyboard really can provide. I think there's a decent number of other applications that are the same. And I don't think this is just a Mac thing. I think we'll still continue to see kind of a blending of desktop OSs and mobile OSs, but I still think there's going to be a decent enough divide between the two to keep those products separate. I should also note that an old friend of mine, his company launched a product called Codeless. It's over at launchwithcodeless.com. It's not a complete software development package for iOS, but it is an interface builder that runs on iOS. It can export code that you can then integrate into your products. So we're already starting to head that direction. Oh, and my favorite kind of pizza is, well, any kind of pizza. I like pizza. What was my first phone? I guess it depends on what you want to qualify as a phone. Just like my first mobile phone at all or my first smartphone. My first mobile phone that I ever had was a Motorola StarTAC. It was the CDMA version, so I had like a little bit of data. I could like check the news and the weather and stuff on it. This was way back in the late 90s. And it totally went against the grain. Like all my friends bought one of the Nokia brick phones where they could play Snake and text message each other, and that was kind of it. I wanted something really small, and the StarTAC was just super cool. I think it's kind of hilarious how for a while there, the phone industry as a whole went towards just try and make things smaller and smaller and smaller. And now we're going the absolute opposite direction with smartphones where we just want bigger and bigger. In terms of my first smartphone, it was a BlackBerry Pearl 8100. Can't quite remember the model number. It was after I had gone through a long string of really crappy flip phones in the early to mid 2000s that just kept failing. I was getting sick of them. I had done some research at the time, like what's just the most durable phone? I wasn't even necessarily looking for a smartphone. And everyone said, you know, Blackberries are built really, really well. So I just ponied up and bought a Blackberry, and I turned into an absolute like Blackberry addict after that. That's where I really cut my teeth in terms of smartphones. And there will be an episode someday where I talk about maybe the rise and fall of BlackBerry and what they did wrong and everything. I did, of course, obviously eventually switch to other smartphone platforms, but I was on Blackberries for quite a while. And every once in a while, I still kind of feel nostalgic for it. Do I think AI poses a future threat to humans, like the Matrix scenario, the Terminator scenario, automation of jobs, increased poverty and underemployment, increased surveillance, and so on? I'm not sure I would necessarily call AI a threat. Like the Matrix scenario and the Terminator scenario where the robots are going to have this major uprising and kill us all. No, I don't think that's really plausible at all. In terms of automation of jobs, we're there already. In terms of poverty and underemployment, well, all I can think of is we've been through major revolutions in terms of labor before, right? AI is just kind of the next step in robots and automation. We've already seen automation take over jobs for over 100 years now, and there's never been mass poverty, mass unemployment caused by it. Generally, what happens is when automation enters a job, some people will stay behind to act as either a transition force or to manage the automation, manage the robots, make sure that they keep working, do the maintenance on them. What we've also found, though, is, yeah, people are going to lose jobs, but as a result of the automation, as a result of the extra efficiency in, say, a manufacturing process, prices tend to come down. So that leaves people with more disposable income, which they can spend on other stuff. And that leads to new industries growing and needing to hire people. So it ends up just kind of being a wash, I tend to think. Yeah, as things start to get more automated and AI kind of takes over, sure, I think people will get pushed out of jobs, but I don't think they're going to be unemployed for a significantly long period of time. I think they'll end up finding a new job in maybe another field. Do I have a day job or is YouTube my full-time gig? I am nowhere near being able to do YouTube as a full-time gig, which I'm a little torn about. Some days I would love to do this full-time. Other days, not quite so much. There's a lot of variability. I mean, the internet's very fickle, right? And I'm encouraged by all the other big YouTubers who have managed to make it, who have managed to grow their channel sufficiently to turn it into a full-time job. And if I could get to that point where it would be relatively stable, I would strongly consider making that leap. But one, I'm a little put off by all the changes in uncertainty over what's going on with YouTube these days. The adpocalypse and all the demonetization and all that kind of stuff. I mean, that's a little bit of a worry. The other thing is just the simple mechanics of it. I've only got 77, 78 or so thousand subscribers as I'm filming this. And I appreciate every single one of my subscribers and viewers, but that's just nowhere near enough for me to make a living in terms of ad revenue. I'm like an order of magnitude off from being able to do that. So maybe someday we'll have to see how the numbers work out. What about a rechargeable battery mod for the Game Boy Color? Well, you can look at that rechargeable battery mod video that I did for the Game Boy Advance. That module is very likely to work in pretty much any other console that takes two AA batteries. You may have to do some additional modification to the battery compartment in whatever you want to stick it in, like a Game Boy Color. I'm not too interested in like going down the path of designing my own special battery pack just for the Game Boy Color, simply because regular AA rechargeables have gotten really good in the last few years. I mean, if this were 10 or 15 years ago, yeah, there were like nickel metal hydride rechargeable AA's back then, but the chemistry has just gotten a lot better. So yeah, you could totally go and come up with a custom rechargeable battery pack for really any handheld console. But these days, I think it's a lot easier just to go out and buy a set of Eneloops. All right, Stefan from Patreon. Thank you, Stefan, for your support. You recently talked in great detail about the CD. Would you please make a contribution on other formats such as the mini disc or cassettes? Do you think that they could experience another hype like the vinyl? Thank you for your technique, philosopher's thoughts. I'm not sure I'm really a philosopher, but mini disc, cassettes, other formats like that, all I can say is, will I talk about them? Will I showcase them? Stay tuned. The other part of that, though, will they ever experience the so-called hype like we've been seeing with vinyl? I'm not quite so sure. I think the other digital formats are either too new or too similar to what we have now for them to really go through kind of a resurgence, right? Like mini disc, like the mini CDs that you could sometimes buy CD singles on, like DAT, digital audio tape. I think in some ways, because they're already digital, they're already, pretty much pristine audio quality, they're still very similar to the CD, and CDs are still very similar to MP3 files and streaming music, so maybe they'll see a resurgence. I'm not so sure. Other analog formats, especially like tape, either reel-to-reel or cassettes. Cassettes have been trying to make a bit of a comeback. They've been, in some ways, riding the wave that is vinyl, but I just don't see cassettes really taking off the same way vinyl has, simply because of the way they work and their convenience. I think a lot of people would argue that cassettes just don't quite sound as good, and while for nostalgic purposes, there could be some benefit to it, there's also the modern practicality of things. People are fairly impatient. They don't want to wait. With vinyl records, if you want to skip a track, you simply lift the needle and you move it over to the next track. With cassettes or reel-to-reel, you have to fast forward. And most cassette decks don't have any sort of automatic stop on the next track type of system. Cassettes weren't really designed like that from the beginning. So it's a matter of patience if you want to use a cassette. You know, at the end of it, if you don't listen to the other side of a cassette, you have to rewind it. That takes time. Vinyl is very similar to CD in that it's random access and it's pretty much instantaneous if you just want to skip ahead. You don't have to rewind it at the end. And so I think that's in some ways why vinyl is really kind of stuck with the public these days. It's just this overall level of impatience that I guess we all have now. What is my favorite pixelated or retro-styled indie game from 2017? I think the pretty easy and obvious answer is going to be Sonic Mania. That one's 2017, right? Not 2016. I love Sonic Mania simply because it just nailed it. And you may want to go watch a previous podcast episode where I talked about it a bit, talked about these kind of retro games that are been made modern, but Sonic Mania just really nailed it on all counts as being a modern but retro title. And it definitely hits the nostalgic side of things because it's very true to the original in terms of how it plays. I'm also really excited to see that the one thing a lot of people were kind of upset about with Sonic Mania when it first came out was the lack of a physical release. As I'm filming this, I just read an article saying that Sonic Mania Plus is coming out soon, which is going to add like some additional play modes, levels, that kind of stuff. But it's also going to see a physical release, which is super awesome. What are my thoughts on both Mazda's Skyactiv-X and Nissan and Infinity's variable compression internal combustion engines? I'm not that familiar with what Nissan and Infinity are doing with their engines. I've heard a little bit about it. I just haven't had the time to kind of research it in depth. I am fairly familiar with what Mazda's doing with Skyactiv-X. Both of them, the goal really is to just try and further the efficiency of the gasoline-fueled internal combustion engine. What Skyactiv-X does is it effectively tries to get your gas engine to run more like a diesel in terms of not necessarily needing a spark to get the gas to ignite. Now, that's not really easy to do with gas, so there's still a little bit of spark involved in Skyactiv-X, but the overall idea is to try and get the air-fuel mixture to burn much more cleanly, much more efficiently, to get more power out of a smaller amount of fuel, get more fuel economy. It's pretty amazing that Mazda was able to pull that off with Skyactiv-X, because that's something that manufacturers have been chasing for actually quite a long time. Do I think it's going to make a huge difference in the long term? Not really. I don't think it's necessarily going to mean that we'll still be seeing gasoline-fueled vehicles in 50 years. It's going to be a bridge. While there's a lot of excitement for electric vehicles and more people are jumping on that bandwagon, I feel like the charging infrastructure still just isn't quite there yet. And the selection of vehicles still isn't really quite there yet. A lot of people are still looking at petroleum-fueled cars. So Skyactiv-X is really going to be kind of a bridge. Maybe we as a society, as a country, as a planet, whatever, aren't quite necessarily ready to go complete whole hog into only electric vehicles, but we definitely need something more efficient than what we have now. Skyactiv-X and other technologies like that can really kind of fill that gap. So that's pretty exciting, but I wouldn't expect to see cars with that type of engine in them being around for a significant length of time. Did I ever use Windows 95 or even own it? I remember using DOS. I remember using Windows 3.1. I also remember installing Windows 95 on computers off of floppy disks. It was something like 35 floppies. It was an absolute nightmare to install. Much easier to come off of a CD, but yes, I did use Windows 95. A lot of people think that I'm some sort of like crazy Mac head or whatever. Yeah, I use Apple products, but I've also used Microsoft products for the same length of time. I'm pretty much truly dual platform. So yeah, I remember Windows 95, 98, all those others. I think I still have a sealed copy, like OEM copy of 95 kicking around somewhere in storage. I'll dig it out someday. But yeah, I definitely used Windows 95 when it was new. Lossless AAC or FLAC? Well, by lossless AAC, I suspect you mean ALAC, ALAC, Apple lossless audio compression, because I don't believe there's any sort of lossless mode for AAC specifically. But in terms of ALAC versus FLAC, I don't really have a preference. They both do the job just as well. Because they're lossless audio compression, you can't really tell a difference between the two in terms of sound quality. I just use whatever I can get. If a particular web store sells things as FLAC, I'll buy them in FLAC. If it's ALAC, I'll buy them in ALAC. As I am an iPhone user, I do use iTunes to manage the music that I store locally on my phone. So I end up converting stuff to ALAC because that's the one format that iTunes supports. It sounds like FLAC may be coming at some point in the future, which I'll be happy about, because I have noticed that FLAC is just a little bit more efficient in terms of getting file sizes shrunk down smaller, but I'm not like a diehard fan of either one of them, really. How long have I been in the IT industry and where did I start? I guess it depends on how you want to define IT industry. If you want to think of it in terms of just working on computers for money, I've been in the field for almost 20 years, which is kind of scary. By that measure, I started in high school working at a computer store, both doing sales and service, so repairing machines. If you want to look at it more from a professional, like working in an office environment, working on systems and all that kind of stuff, not necessarily in a retail environment, it's probably closer to 15 years, a little under 15 years that I've been doing that. I basically got my first IT job in college. So either way, a really freaking long time. What does compute? Absolutely nothing.
Out of order! Even in the future, nothing works!
Do I think modern ThinkPads are getting too far away from the original robust design that IBM originally made? Well, I do think that Lenovo has done a good job with the ThinkPad line. I know there are a lot of real diehard ThinkPad aficionados that'll say, oh, Lenovo's done a horrible job, whatever. I mean, the march of progress is what it is, right? Yeah, they've definitely changed a bit. I mean, they've all gone to the widescreen, which is pretty common, and we've seen fewer of the keys like across the top row of the keyboard. Fewer of the kind of weird, nifty features like the ThinkLight. I know some people like the ThinkLight versus backlit illumination on the keyboard. But overall, I think they've kept the same kind of feeling. I mean, they have to go where the market is. And are there really that many people who want a super, like, truly retro-styled ThinkPad? Well, I mean, they came out with that anniversary edition one, but even then they had to stick with some modern themes like the widescreen display. So I don't think they've gone too far away from what the original ThinkPad set out to be. All right, 2 questions here from Chops. I'm going to stick with the second one because I think it's a bit more interesting. Do I ever feel overwhelmed by having technology in my daily life? What are some ways that we can balance out tech usage with other tasks and activities? That's a really good one. Yes, I do feel a bit overwhelmed by tech, especially at work where I have to deal with it all the time. I mean, there are days where I come home from work after having just battled computers and technology all day, dealing with stuff that just doesn't want to behave. And I just feel like, you know what, I want to sit on the couch and read a book or something like that, right? You get a little burned out on it. At the same time, though, if I am doing that, if I'm sitting on the couch reading a book and my phone buzzes, I instinctively reach for it to check and see what it is. So it's kind of tough. We've really been trained in a way to be very responsive to technology. I don't necessarily want to say it's an addiction. I'd say it's more of a mental process that we've adopted. Like training an animal to do something, you know, like the bell rings, that means food's going to happen, kind of the classic Pavlov type of stuff. I think we're seeing that with especially mobile technology, but just technology in general, where we have a few spare seconds, we want to fill them. We're no longer content with just sitting there and being bored or sitting there and being lost in our own thoughts. We'd rather be entertained. We'd rather look for something engaging. And yeah, it's tough to break away from that. I've known people who will take a vacation and just not bring any technology with them. Maybe they'll go camping in the woods where they don't get any cell signal anyway. So it's like, there's no point in even bringing a mobile device with you. Maybe that's the best way to do it. Maybe it's some sort of self-imposed exile periodically. The other thing that may help is, social media is a big thing, but social media networks rise and fall. So maybe if we're a little less eager to jump on new ones or are more willing to constrain ourselves into, I'll set up a Twitter account and I'll set up an Instagram account, but I'm not going to bother with Facebook, or I'm not going to bother with Snapchat or something like that. If we limit the scope at which we're willing to be kind of chained to our mobile device, maybe that'll help too. I don't know. This is a really big, deeper issue that I think we need some real psychologists and sociologists and stuff to weigh in on. And I don't think even all of them have really come to a consensus. Has my cat ever hopped up in my lap or on my desk while trying to film a podcast or repair some electronic item? Well, I can tell you that the reason you've been seeing my cat in cameos and relatively recent videos and podcasts is because she's taken to meowing at the door if I close it. She's generally good and won't jump in my lap or on my desk if I'm working on something. But she does, of course, like any cat, get curious about stuff, and she wants to do what she wants to do. So sometimes she'll ruin a shot or get in the middle of a shot, but generally she won't actively disrupt anything that I'm doing that's hands-on, well, thankfully. Do I think smartwatches are essentially beepers or pagers? I think smartwatches are still relatively limited in their utility, partially just because we haven't figured out exactly what they're good for yet. They're great at reiterating information that your phone wants to tell you, like notifications and text messages and stuff. And they've also found a bit of a niche in terms of health, like exercise tracking. If you do so many steps per day or you run a certain distance or whatever, they're getting good at that. I think the next frontier for them is going to get deeper into health, and we've been starting to see this where they'll be able to check your blood pressure or maybe even your blood glucose, that kind of thing. I think they'll really start to become more useful when they're better at giving you basic body stats, whether you're healthy or not, whether you're having a condition or not. I could see a future where a watch could constantly be watching your pulse, and if it notices something irregular with your pulse, or it stops, or if it notices that you've fallen down and aren't getting back up, or having difficulty breathing, something like that, that your watch would be able to say, call for an ambulance, and then GPS locate you so that they can find you, that sort of thing. I could see some real benefits to that kind of stuff. But in terms of other utility, other than just basic communication, and then some maybe real corner cases like Pokemon Go, smartwatches don't really seem to have a whole ton more utility. I think there's a lot more that they can grow into. We just need to figure out what that is. Mike Shamari from over on Patreon. Thank you, Mike, for your support. He asked, do you watch other YouTube channels? Yeah, quite a few actually. I subscribe to all of my YouTube channels as my own channel. I don't have a second account or whatever that I watch YouTube with. And there's a reason for that. It's because if I subscribe to a channel, it's because I really want to watch their content and I would recommend other people watch that as well. There are way too many channels that I watch to list. It would just take too long. But if you go through on my channel main page, I've got a few of my favorites pinned over onto the right side there. And I'll occasionally tweet out channels that I find or like videos for particular videos and channels that I love to watch. Bad Obsession Motorsport is a great one from the car side of things. For video games, retro technology, Techmoan, Lazy Game Reviews. Who else? The 8-Bit Guy's pretty good. The Gaming Historian. From general technology, MKBHD, I really like watching. I like the Camera Store TV. They do really, really good camera reviews. The list just goes on and on. There's a lot of really good stuff on YouTube. Okay, next question. Hey, Colin, I'm in the process of earning an associate's degree in CIS and hope to obtain a bachelor's degree in the future. Can you talk about the field of IT and your experiences with your career? I aspire to be a software developer, but also considering an IT position as an alternative if programming isn't right for me. I can tell you that certain aspects of IT are very unstable or are changing or will be changing soon, and other parts of them are very stable and aren't going to be changing very much at all over time. Software development is one of those ones that I think you will always be in good shape with. As time goes on, you'll start to see more competition in the field because there have been many pushes in the last few years to get more and more people into software development, getting people able to write code. But we're always going to have more and more demand for people to write code. It kind of ties back in with that whole AI and automation type of discussion. We're always going to need people who can write the software to make all of that automation work. In terms of other forms or parts of IT like systems administration, I would love to say that that's a very stable part of the field and we're not going to see a whole lot of change in terms of employability and it's only going to grow or whatever. But this whole push to, in quotes, the cloud has caused a lot of uncertainty. If you're going to get into any particular part of IT, systems admin, that sort of stuff, stick with networking because networking is always going to be relevant. Whether you're really good at dealing with servers or not, I think part of the automation and stuff is going to lie there too. With virtual machines and not necessarily needing to be hands-on so much with systems anymore, I think we will start to see fewer and fewer systems admin type of positions going on just because things are going to become more push button, make server work type of thing. But we will always need people who understand networking because that's what's going to get everything to still talk to each other. Do I have anything special planned for my 100th podcast? Yeah, I guess that's coming up, isn't it? I hadn't really thought about it. Maybe I take a week off? Oh. Okay, two-part question here. Do I consider myself a collector, a gamer, or something in between, or don't really care for labels? And two, why don't I feel the need to display my video games or the stuff I collect? I don't really like labels that much simply because it compartmentalizes people and everyone's interpretation of a label could be different than somebody else's. I'm somewhere in between on all of that. I'm not a diehard collector. I mean, I don't have one of everything of a certain thing. Like I don't have one of every Super NES game or anything like that. I don't even have one of every, piece of hardware manufactured for a certain generation of console. I do like the hardware a lot. If I am a collector, I guess I'm a hardware collector because I really like to see that progression in technology of things that are kind of like computers, but not really. But of course, I play those consoles too, so I need to have some software for them. So I'm a bit of a gamer as well. As to why I don't display them, well, I display some of the stuff, around here in the office of just the stuff I collect. But the reason why I don't have it all on display is simply due to space. I don't have a whole ton of room. I don't have a whole ton of shelf space or anything like that. So most of my games and other technology items are stored in bins in the closet just because I need to be efficient with how I store them. It basically keeps me from being able to display them. But I will occasionally rotate out what I have on display and that sort of thing. What's my view on the Linux desktop? Do I think it'll become just as popular as Windows or Mac? So the argument of, well, the Linux desktop is coming any day now, any year now, has been going on for years. And I know there's going to be some Linux people out there who are going to hate me for saying this, but it's never going to happen in terms of the desktop. Humans tend to be very binary in their mindset. It's an either or type of approach. In terms of desktops, you have Windows, you have Mac. In terms of server OSs, you have Windows, you have Linux. In terms of mobile devices, you have Android, you have iOS. Any third party that tries to be in the mix generally ends up with a very small percentage of that mix. And either they stick it out and stay really small, or they just disappear, like, say, Windows Mobile. So I just don't think that the Linux desktop is really ever going to become a huge popular success unless something very drastic happens, like, say, Apple decides to discontinue the Mac and just push everybody to iOS, and suddenly everyone who is using a Mac who still needs a desktop and doesn't want to use Windows, they have to go somewhere. Or some other scenario like that. I just don't think that's going to happen. Where Linux has really shined, of course, is in servers. But if you think of Linux as just an overall platform and not just a desktop OS, Linux has done really, really well for itself. Not just because of servers, but think Android. Android is the most popular mobile operating system, and it's all based on Linux. So I would say that no, Linux isn't a success on the desktop front, but it's a huge success just as a platform in general. What made me get into consoles and technology in general, and how did I become such a success on YouTube in such a little amount of time? Well, the first part of that question, I've just always been interested in gaming and technology and computers and stuff, so there was really no one particular thing that got me into it. I've just been surrounded by it my entire life. That second part of the question, how did I become such a success on YouTube in such a little amount of time? I wouldn't necessarily consider myself a success on YouTube. I guess it depends on how you want to define success on YouTube. Some would say, well, you've got a huge following and you're able to do it full time and all that. Well, again, I appreciate all of my subscribers, all my viewers, all my Patreon supporters. But if you think of it big picture, 70 something thousand subscribers really isn't that much. And it took me like 4 years to get to this point. So I wouldn't necessarily call that a small amount of time either. There are channels that have taken 18 months to hit 1 million subscribers, or a year to hit 500,000 subscribers, that sort of thing. Those, I would say, are the true successes, the true standouts that were able to get somewhere really, really fast. I am certainly very lucky because I know there are lots of other channels that have been around for as long, if not longer, and haven't had the same reach that my own channel has had. So I'm definitely very thankful for everything that I have, but to say that I'm some sort of like standout, success on YouTube, I don't know if I would necessarily agree with that. What was the best system that I used in the early 2000s? I guess the question is, what do you mean by system? Do you mean game system or do you mean computer system? Game system, early 2000s, I'd probably have to say PlayStation 2, just because, like everyone else who would say PlayStation 2, it was just a huge shift in terms of gaming. In terms of quality, what it was able to do, it had a lot of really good titles. It was expensive, yeah, but it was a console that was well worth the price, especially when it was brand new. In terms of computer system from the early 2000s, the best one, maybe the PC that I had in college. I had a Dell something or other tower that I beefed it up pretty good, and I had a 17-inch LCD. I saved up my money. And this was back when LCD, like desktop monitors, were really expensive. The monitor, that 17-inch LCD, cost more than the computer did. And the computer was pretty good. I'd like to say the monitor was something like $800 for a 17-inch. But I just really, really liked that setup. It was when Windows XP was fairly new and everyone really liked Windows XP. It was when the internet was really starting to get into its own, and we had just tons of stuff going on and it was growing, and it wasn't just, dorks in their basement surfing the web. It was lots of real useful information out there. So maybe a combination of that hardware and the time period when I had it, and maybe that was my best system. Okay, another bit of a longer question, but what are my thoughts on various DLC practices in today's games? As a whole, I don't really have a problem with DLC as long as it's an actual value add for the game. I really don't like it when you pay your $50 or $60 for a game And then you have to pay a bunch of extra money for DLC just to either be able to complete the game or complete the game without a ridiculous amount of grinding. That seems to be an industry trend that really needs to end. Where I'm okay with DLC is when you pay your 50 or 60 bucks and you get a decent full featured game that's fine on its own, a good value at that 50 or 60 bucks. And then the manufacturer or developer maybe throws in a DLC for, say, 10 bucks that gets you some extra levels or some extra bonus content that pushes it above and beyond what it was as a game before. I'm thinking something like Mario Kart 8, where, Mario Kart 8 at 60 bucks with the tracks that came in the box, that was a good deal. And then Nintendo dropped the DLC and you literally got like a lot more tracks. So it's not like they were trying to sell you the game again, but at the same time, it's not like the original game for 60 bucks was underwhelming in terms of what you got. That's where I think the sweet spot is for DLC. Anything else, and it's really just kind of a money grab, and it's really distasteful. Okay, last question. This one's from Lucas over on Patreon. Lucas, thank you for your support. What's my favorite version of Tetris, and what's my favorite variation of it if I have one? In terms of favorite version, that's a little bit of a tough one because there have been a few different versions for different platforms that I've become really fond of. Overall, though, I would probably have to say Tetris Worlds, just because I really like the controls. I really like the selection of like backgrounds and music and stuff. It's just visually very engaging. And it has my favorite variation, which is Cascade Mode. That's the one where if you break a block or, complete a line and you create a void, blocks can kind of cascade down on their own. It's like Tetris with gravity. I think that's really fun because you can set up these cool chain reactions where you can complete a line and then a piece falls and it completes a line and then maybe another piece falls and it completes a line, that sort of thing. It adds an extra little bit of strategy to the game, which I think is engaging and fun. So, yeah, maybe Tetris Worlds with Cascade Mode. But that was the last question for this time around. This Q&A was quite a lot longer than ones in the past. I like going through it a lot more questions this time. Let me know if you think maybe the next Q&A for next year should be shorter, should be longer, whatever. I'm open to your opinion on this one. I only do it once a year, so we might as well make it worth it, I guess. But anyway, let me know what you think down in the comments below. Anyway, if you are interested in an audio-only version of these podcasts, I have them available for Patreon supporters at all contribution levels, so as little as $1 a month gets you access. They usually drop on Patreon a few days before they show up on YouTube, and Patreon supports RSS feeds, which is really cool. So that's just, something to think about. If you like this one, I would appreciate a thumbs up. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at thisdoesnotcomp. And as always, thanks for watching.